Hi, it's Heather from MCI Designs and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about additives for paint pouring in acrylics. First we're going to start off with talking a little bit about the paint qualities themselves. So here I have a couple examples of some soft body paints, and these are like a student quality Artist Loft, which is readily available at Michael's, and Liquitex Basics, which are also available at Michael's. So when you're considering the kinds of cells and the kinds of effects that you want to get or achieve in your painting, and you're deciding whether or not you want to use an additive to achieve those, one thing that you should consider as well is looking at the qualities of the paint or the characteristics of the paint itself. This particular one is an Artist Loft metallic red, and this one is an opaque. Now, when you're looking at paint, you can either have opaque, which means the color is going to sit above and on top of other colors. You won't see the color underneath, so it's basically non-see-through. Then you have things like this is another opaque. This one is a translucent or a semi-transparent. That means that you can sort of see the color underneath, and the transparent colors you can see the color underneath. So there's kind of varying degrees along that spectrum. But every paint that you buy, whether it's on the bottle or on the manufacturer's website, you should be able to find out about the characteristics. So the little black square generally means opaque, and when you have one that has, a half filled in square, that's your translucent, or your, sometimes they call it semi-transparent, sometimes they call it semi-opaque. It all depends on where on that sliding scale it kind of sits. And then the one with the open square that's not filled in at all is a transparent. So when you're combining your colors and planning your color palette for a pour, you should always consider these particular characteristics of the paint, because you can achieve effects with cells and that sort of thing using the densities of the pigment and the transparencies of your paint versus translucent versus opaque, or semi-transparent, semi-translucent, all that stuff. In the combination of colors that you use, you can achieve those types of effects, and it's worth playing with just to see the kinds of effects that you can achieve without using additives. Additives are great if you're playing and you're not really considering or too concerned about it being archival. You can achieve great things with using things like silicone or dimethicone. So this one here is a silicone oil, and I got this off of Amazon. You can also buy, there's a whole bunch of different brands. This one came in a 3-pack. You can also get it in Canada at Canadian Tire, and it's or Walmart, and it's fairly inexpensive. There's other brands, but it's all basically the same thing. It's just silicone oil. So there's this one. I went to, we have a store called Opus Art Supplies in my town here, and they have this acrylic demo acrylic silicone oil that's been formulated just for pouring. It comes with a nice little dropper top so that you can control the amount that goes into your pour. I haven't tried it yet. This is on my list of things to experiment with, but there's also different kinds that you can choose from. A lot of people like the coconut milk. This you can get at Walmart or your local grocery store, and it's actually a hair serum, but one of the first ingredients in there is dimethicone. They also have it in the personal lubricants aisle at your local pharmacy. If the first ingredient or the first couple ingredients is a dimethicone, you can probably use it in a pour. I know a lot of people tend to use some of the Astroglide or something like that. I can't remember the exact name of it, but I like the coconut milk. This dispenser, though, I find when you use it and you give it a pump, you get a lot. So be really careful with your quantities. You may even want to just include this or pour this into another bottle where you have a little bit more control over how much of the oil you're actually using in your pour, because that's going to make a big difference. You add too much, and I'll show you what happens when you add too much. This here is 100% dimethicone. We have a cosmetics manufacturer here in town, and I phoned them up and said, I want some dimethicone, and they gave me this. So if you have something like that in your town, that's great. If not, you can always try one of these other products and see what you can find locally. There's lots of choices out there. Like I said, you can get it at Walmart, Canadian Tire, Amazon, all sorts of places. But anyway, those are the kinds of things that you can add. Another one is this liquid wrench. It's a silicone spray. They also have one made by WD-40. I think it's got a black label on it, but just be careful to make sure that it's the silicone spray that you're using. I know a lot of artists like to use the liquid wrench or the WD-40 brand spray one. The only problem with these ones is you have less control about how much actually goes into your pour. I like ones that have a little dropper on it so that you can control the amount. And these ones tend to also be, when you spray it, it sprays a lot of little particles that mix into your paint. And when you overmix silicone into your paint, you end up with smaller cells. If you want the nice big fat juicy cells, you tend to work with something more along the lines of a silicone oil, and then you only mix it in a couple of turns and poof, you're done. That's it. So I'm going to show you an example of one more item that you can use that helps to achieve cells, and you can use alcohol. Now, it's best to use something over 90%. This is a 91% isopropyl alcohol. I've used this one a lot with alcohol inks, but you can also use it in a pour. Alcohol, when used with acrylics, tends to break up the binders in the paint, so it can give you some neat effects that look like cells, but it's actually kind of breaking down the bonds of your paint. So some people use it for cells, some people use it for other effects, but it can be quite handy, so it's fun to experiment. So you can take a crack at it. What I've done is I take the alcohol and I pour it into a small little squirt bottle that I got from the cosmetics section at Walmart. It's just a little plastic travel bottle, and it works really well. So you can just spray it directly on your paint. You can mix some of the alcohol into your paint. Just be aware that if you're using alcohol as an additive mixed into your paint, that the alcohol will evaporate out fairly quickly. So if you're going to use alcohol as an additive, mix it in right before you do your pour. So that's that. I'll show you some examples. This is a clock that I made on an old record. It's kind of a dog's breakfast when you look at the colors. This was kind of an experimental piece, but this one was using the liquid wrench, and I wanted to see what kind of effect it would get. And these are what I ended up with. You get all these teeny tiny little cells. You've got a few big ones here and there, but mostly teeny tiny little cells, which, if that's what you're looking for, fly at it, Bob's your uncle. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more along the lines of, larger cells, that sort of thing, you may want to consider something different. Or if you don't want any cells at all, don't bother with any additives. So that's kind of what the liquid wrench does. Now, I did some experiments at a fluid pouring class, and some of the things that we worked with was trying different types of additives to get some different effects, mostly alcohol, but the majority of the time we were working with the qualities of the paint itself to try and achieve getting cells. So if you look here in this area and here, you'll see all of these little teeny tiny dots. This was using the 91% alcohol sprayed onto the piece of Yupo paper. Now this Yupo paper is fabulous. It's just like a polyurethane paper, so you can paint on it, it's plastic, you can get it wet, you can do whatever with it, and it's great for practice. The Yupo paper is expensive, but it can also, get a really good one. You can cut it out and frame it. You can use it in jewelry. You can do all sorts of stuff. But anyway, this is kind of the effect that I achieved with using some of the alcohol. So kind of depends on what you're looking for. But this is what we were trying to achieve, is achieving these nice big fat cells with using just the qualities of the paint. So sometimes you will use your paint a little bit thinner. So you might have one that's a transparent, say one that's an opaque, so that one might show through the other one. You also consider paint density. Some have heavier pigments in them so that they tend to sink in a pour, whereas others are lighter and they tend to rise. So if you know the qualities of your paint and you can work a little bit with the consistency of the paint, like in this case, I think I did the black a little bit thinner than the red. And when I swiped the black over top of the red, we got the red coming up and the black falling down. And we got this nice cells happening, and the same with the yellow right here. So anyway, it's fun to experiment with just to see, but I like using this because when you paint using an additive like the silicone, you have to clean it off before you can put any kind of varnish or resin or anything like that on your painting, because the oil will come up through the paint and it will repel any type of finish that you want to put on there. So they have to be cleaned off very carefully, and that can be a bit of a process because you always run the risk of damaging your painting if you don't do it properly. So here's another example of just using the qualities of the paint itself with the different colors, different densities, opaque versus transparent or semi-transparent to achieve some cells. So it is possible to get cells without using additives. But if you're using additives, you want to be careful that you don't use too much and you mix them in the appropriate way so that you achieve the effect that you want to achieve. So let me grab another example. Okay, this is one of my more hideous paintings. They don't all turn out fabulous, I have to say. This one, it looks rather like a chicken, and this is a rather phallic kind of portion. So this one, if you look at it in the light, you can see the oil on the surface of the painting. I don't know if you can see it very well on the screen, but there's a lot of oil here and here and here and here. And you can always tell too, like there's an actual, when you feel it right across the top, you can feel where the paint is almost separated out because the oil, there was too much in it and it was not mixed in well enough. So it was like a little puddle of oil sitting right on top of the paint when I flipped the cup onto the painting. And then when you pull it up, the oil was right on top of the canvas. And so you get this separation. And anyway, this one does not look good. So this one is not getting varnished, but it's a good example of kind of what not to do. So yeah, the chicken with a penis painting, not a good one. So let's just put that aside. This is one that I haven't decided whether I like it like this or like this. But this one was done using a swipe. And I think there was only 2 of the colors that I laid down in this strip here that had a little bit of silicone in them on top of a white base. And then I just swiped the colors up over top of the white, going in both directions. And most of the effects that you can get here are due to the silicone, but depending on, again, the consistency and the densities of your paint, you can achieve those same kinds of lacing and separation with the cells without using silicone as well. But that's just kind of an example of what you can achieve in terms of cells. Now, if you don't want cells, don't use any additives. But one thing to be aware is if you are using the Flood Floetrol as your pouring medium, I find that the Flood Floetrol tends to give you cells sometimes even when you don't want them. So this is a tree ring pour, one that I particularly like. It's just, I love the pink. And these are the little cells that pop up from two two functions. First, the Floetrol sometimes will give you some of these cells. And the other is air bubbles. So you get these air bubbles in your paint if you've mixed it too well, or mixed it up just before you pour. You get a lot of air bubbles in the paint itself. And sometimes after you've poured it on your canvas, those will pop, and then you will see the color of the paint underneath, because the black is heavier. The black is underneath the pink, and the pink has the air bubbles in it and pop, and then you get these little black dots. So that's something else to consider. A lot of people will mix up their paint one day, let it sit overnight, and then they'll use it the following day. And allowing it to sit allows those air bubbles inside the paint to kind of percolate up to the top and dissipate. So you end up with less air bubbles in your paint. So even with this one, you can use a butane torch like this one. I got it at the local kitchen store. Works great. And you just turn on the torch and torch it over the top, and it will help pop some of those air bubbles. But anyway, some of them will pop up after, and you tend to miss a few no matter what. But anyway, that's something to consider. So this is the kind of effect that you can achieve without using any kinds of additives. And this one's one of my favorites. It kind of reminds me of a little elephant. This one I did using the Artist Loft metallic paints. They have a metallic blue, a metallic green, I think there's a metallic cobalt, and a metallic purple in this, with white. So I did a flip cup and a flip and drag, and this is kind of what I ended up with. But this one has silicone in it. And so these are the nice, big, fat, juicy cells that you can get using silicone products in the right proportion. So I really like this one. Anyway, let me put those aside. Oh, sorry, get my arm in the screen. So when you're mixing silicone into your pour, the more you mix it, the smaller your cells are going to end up being. So this one here is some paint that I mixed up like last month. It has no silicone in it yet, but I was going to do a pour later today with some silicone in it. So as you can see, this one, it could almost use a little bit of water because it's been sitting for a while. So you can see how the paint is kind of running off the stick. It's a little bit thick for what I was going to do, but not too bad. So when I'm ready to do my pour, I'm going to add my silicone oil. And this is a 5-ounce cup. I got these on Amazon.com. They didn't have these in Canada for this particular size, so I had to order them from the US site, which was fine. But they're pretty inexpensive. I got like a box of 50 of them. And the best part is they come with lids. So they've got these great little lids. They seal up nice and tight, and you can keep your paint like forever in these things. So super nice. You can use them for pouring. You can use them for storing. For mixing, they're great. So anyway, but they're little 5-ounce cups, so you can use them they're a good size for a typical pour. And let's see, I'm going to try this one, the silicone oil. This is supposed to be designed specifically for paint pouring. So what I typically do when I'm going to add, for this amount of paint, I would generally add, I don't know, maximum 3 drops of silicone. So there's 1. I'm going to go with 2. Oops. Well, 3. So, like I say, a little silicone goes a long way. So when you're pouring your silicone into your paint, be very careful. Don't squeeze it, because then you get this big squirt, and you don't want that. So you can see, if you look at the surface of the paint, there's 2 little dimples where the oil is sitting. If I took that and flipped it on top of my canvas right now, when I poured it, you'd get this little blank space where the silicone is the first thing that hits the canvas, because this is on the top of the paint, or the top of the cup. When you flip it over, that's then on the top of the canvas. So if the silicone hits your canvas first, you can end up with these gaps and these weird bubbly things in your paint where it just looks like you can see the canvas through it. So you always want to mix it in a little bit, So I usually do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, about, I don't know, 10 seconds of mixing, and boom, that's it. Make sure you scrape your sides and give it a couple good turnovers. And I wouldn't mix it much more than that, if that. That's probably too much. But the more you sit too, the silicone will tend to rise back up to the top. So you can give it a little quick stir before you pour if this is going to sit for a while. But that's pretty much it. Adding the silicone is really easy. When people use things like the liquid wrench, they might just go to give it a blast right on top. Same thing with the alcohol. If you're going to use alcohol, you can give it a spritz right on the top and then give it a mix. And then either combine your paints into one cup for your pour or pour it directly on the canvas, however you're doing it. Yeah, so that's pretty much the size of it when it comes to paint pouring additives. In terms of what I use, I mean, other people may use other things, and there's whole ton of different products out there. But that's about the gist of it for what I do. Anyway, next video, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools and pieces of equipment that you might want to have or use. And a lot of them you can just find in your own home for paint pouring. So until then, we'll see you next time. Look us up on Facebook or Instagram, MCI Designs, and look us up on our Facebook group, Acrylic Pouring and Fluid Art Canada. We'd love to have you join the conversation. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and hit the bell if you want alerts for future videos, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks. See you next time.